still joining us. I hope we can start by 6 p.m. sharp. Dr. Nisha, I guess we can start since
Yes,
it's
yes,
already
we can
6 p.m.
start, Sheila. Yes, we can start.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I, Dr. Sheetal, and Dr. Charles are your hosts for the evening. We hope all are staying safe and healthy. It's been a year since we met in this platform, and I'm more than proud to announce that we are in the third uninterrupted year of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Memorial Lecture. Invited guests, eminent scholars, and academicians around the globe, friends, well-wishers, and family of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, especially Advocate Gracie Kattakayam, Ms. Jisha Kattakayam, and Mrs. G.B. Kattakayam. We, the students of Professor Kattakayam at Institute of Social Research and Action, proudly invite you to the third memorial lecture in honor of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, an inspiring teacher, seasoned academician, ardent administrator, and most importantly, a greater human being, has always been with us throughout thick and thin. We as students would have never ending narratives that we would all share for being part of him and what he has left us with. This small effort is the least we can do as students and accomplish to live up to his dreams and expectations and to take off from what and where he has left us. A word about the organizing team. Institute for Social Research and Action, an NGO based in Thiruvananthapuram, is an initiative by Professor Kattakai with the idea of engaging in research, training, and advocacy on any social issues that requires an expert engagement. The J.J.K. Students Collective is a band of 41 students to whom he was the research supervisor. They are currently researchers and academicians around the country and abroad. Professor J.J. Kattakayam Memorial Lecture, since it started in 2021, we've been fortunate enough to listen to Professor Arjun Apadure and Professor Michael Burave as the key speakers. On behalf of the organizing team, let me welcome one and all to the Professor J.J. Kattakayam Third Memorial Lecture. Let me bring to your kind attention that we are simultaneously live streaming the entire program, the link to which is given in the chat box. The event has been honored with the presence and active participation of eminent scholars from various corners. Let me now invite Dr. Nisha Jolly Nelson, Head, Department of Sociology, Loyola College of Social Sciences, Thiruvananthapuram, and the convener of the third memorial lecture to welcome the audience. Dr. Nisha, please.
Thank you, Sheila. A very good morning to Professor Margaret Abraham and our global participants who has joined us today, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the J.J.K. Students Collective and the Institute for Social Research and Action, It is my distinct honor and privilege to extend a warm welcome to each one of you to the Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Third Memorial Lecture, an event that holds immense significance for us as we remember a luminary in the field of sociology. Today, as we gather under the banner of the J.J.K. Students Collective and ISRA, we celebrate not just the memory of a remarkable individual, but the collective spirit of 41 research scholars who earned their PhDs under Professor Kattakayam's guidance. Many of them are now teachers and researchers carrying forward the torch of knowledge he ignited. It is with great honor and pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to our distinguished chairperson for today's Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Third Memorial Lecture, Professor Indira Ramarao, a professor of eminence in the School of Social Sciences at M.S. Ramaya University of Applied Sciences, Bangalore, brings to our event a wealth of experience and knowledge. Formerly, the professor and chairperson of the Department of Sociology at the University of Mysore, her contributions to the field have been nothing short of exemplary. She was the past president of Indian Sociological Society and is visiting professor Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Chair, University of Mysore. Professor Indra is a two-time Fulbright Scholar, four-time Shastri Fellow and a Senior Fellow of ICSSR. We are indeed privileged to have Professor R. Indira as our president of today's memorial lecture, and we eagerly anticipate her guidance and insights throughout the event. On behalf
Thank
of
you,
the
Nisha.
organizing, thank you. On behalf of the organizing team and all of us present here, I warmly welcome Professor R. Indira to be the president of this event and for contributing her expertise to this significant occasion. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nisha.
Yes. Today, we are privileged to have Professor Margaret Abraham, Professor of Sociology and the Harry H. Marshall Distinguished Professor at the Hofstra University, Long Island, New York. She is the past president of the International Sociological Association. She has been involved in research and activism for over 3 decades and committed to promoting social justice and social change. Her teaching and research interests include gender, ethnicity, citizenship, intersectionality, globalization, immigration, and domestic violence. She is the author of the award-winning book, Speaking the Unspeakable, Marital Violence Among North Asian Immigrants in the United States, the first book on domestic violence within the South Asian diaspora in the United States. Her edited volumes include Power, Violence and Justice, Reflections, Responses and Responsibilities, Sociology and Social Justice, Integrating Gender, Violence and the State in National and Transnational Contexts, Making a Difference, Linking Research and Action, and Contours of Citizenship, Women, Diversity, and the Practices of Citizenships. She serves on community board organizations, journal editorial boards, and has been a consultant and advisory board member on national and international projects addressing gender-based violence. Professor Abraham's extensive work in sociology, focusing on gender, ethnicity, citizenship, and domestic violence, aligns seamlessly with Professor Kattakayam's dedication to social causes. We, the organizing team, and all of us present here, proudly welcome Professor Margaret Abraham to this memorial lecture. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dolly. Thank you very much.
Yes. Today, we have the distinct honor of hosting 2 esteemed scholars who will share their reflections on the life and legacy of Professor Kattakayam. Firstly, let us extend a warm welcome to Professor Maitreyi Chowdhury, an eminent scholar from Jawaharlal Nehru University and a dear friend of Professor Kattakayam. Professor Chowdhury's presence enrich our event, and we eagerly anticipate the insights she will provide, reflecting not only on the academic contributions, but also the personal camaraderie she shared with our revered mentor. Welcome, ma'am. We also proudly welcome Professor Anthony Palakal, Professor of Sociology at University of Kerala and a dear student of Professor Kattakayam. Professor Palakal's perspective will undoubtedly offer a unique personal dimension to our remembrance. As a student who has been directly influenced by Professor Kattakayam's teachings, his memorial note promises to be a poignant tribute. Welcome, Professor Palakal.
Thank you. Thank you, Nisha.
Today, Our hearts are filled with both gratitude and deep respect for the family members who shared him with us and enriched our lives through their support and love. To Gracie Auntie, the wife of Professor Kattakayam, his children Jibi and Jisha and their family, the grandchildren, and all other family members present, your presence here is a testament to the strength of familial bonds and the enduring legacy that Professor Kattakayam has left behind. On behalf of all of us, I extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Nish.
It is with great pleasure and gratitude that I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Rija Pierce, a beloved student of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, who will be delivering the vote of thanks today. A heartfelt welcome to each distinguished guest, esteemed scholars, cherished friends, and beloved students who have gathered here today for the Professor Jacob John Kattakayam third memorial lecture. A warm and heartfelt welcome to each and every one of us and every one of you as we gather to commemorate and celebrate the profound legacy of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. Thank you. Welcome you all.
Thank you, Dr. Nisha. We feel the evening is truly complete when Professor R. Indra gave her consent to be the chair of the meeting and do the honor of delivering the presidential address. Professor Indra, Professor Eminence in the School of Social Sciences, M.S. Ramaya University of Applied Sciences, Bangalore, is also a close acquaintance of Professor Kattakayam. It's our honor and absolute pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. With most respect, may I now invite Professor Indra to preside over the function and deliver the presidential remarks. Over to you, Professor Indra. Dr. Nisha, do we still have Professor Indra with us?
She has been left. I'll just call her.
We should just wait for a couple of minutes, Professor Abraham, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. I hope she'll rejoin in a couple of minutes.
Already joined. She has already joined. Just ask her to put her mic on. Huh? She has
Professor Indra,
unmute her. Yes.
can we please hear you? I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have done that. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
I sincerely apologize that the power went off and then everything got disconnected. My serious apologies. Okay. So can I start now?
Yes, ma'am, please, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening to all of you. Professor Margaret Abraham, Professor Anthony Palakal, Dr. Nisha, members of John's family, all my dear colleagues, student friends. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of an event which students of Professor Kattakayam have organized, have been doing it for the last 3 years to celebrate the memory of a great teacher, a mentor, and I would say, because I have worked with him for almost 3 decades, and a person which is, according to me, a rare quality, especially in the coming last couple of years, creating second, third, fourth generations of students. And what is happening today is a testimony to that. To me, John has been a dear friend, a mentor, a guide who always not only showed the right path, but also pointed out when, I needed that guidance. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And without taking much time, I would just like to say that the theme of today's lecture, which Professor Margaret Abraham is delivering, is very critical, especially in the times in which we are living. To me, why is this topic so important? Because in the abstract that Professor Abraham has sent, it's mentioned that sociology and social sciences are now under attack because of the stand they have taken or not taken. Now, I think the domestic increase in domestic violence across the world in different forms are either not reported or underreported. And even today, there are many who consider domestic violence as a private issue and something that need not, be discussed in the public domain. I think the audio should be muted by our friend. So, sorry. But I said that the theme of today's lecture is very important. I consider very critical to be discussed in a forum that celebrates the sociology and the contribution of our colleague, who just was not a theoretical academician, but an activist who wanted to make life better for so many of his students and colleagues. And so I say that domestic violence, of course, we do have laws today, especially if you're talking of India itself as an example. Between 2000 and 2010, we had a number of proactive legislations being passed. But the more important thing is, are they implemented? Who are the people who are using these laws to better the quality of their lives? So, as I said, I still believe that domestic violence is considered by many as something to be discussed only in the private sphere, but it is important to engage in a public debate on this issue. And I think that it's here that sociology plays a very significant role, because this is where, to me, public sociology is very important. We must write, speak, and more than that, engage ourselves with the proactive struggles by many groups who have been working to counter domestic violence for several years. Somehow, what I'm really bothered about is the disconnect between the academic world, the world of the universities in most cases, and the real grassroots fights and struggles that are going on to counter domestic violence. So, without saying much, I will wait, and I'm looking forward to listening to Margaret. And I would say that I'm very touched to have been involved in this program to celebrate, I would say, Professor Kattakayam's memory, and also look forward to the opportunity of listening to Professor Margaret. And all I would say is, I would, thank Professor John's students for, this very important program which they have been organizing every year. Thank you for this opportunity, and over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, Professor Indra. Professor Margaret Abraham from Hofstra University, New York, would now deliver the Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Third Memorial Lecture. She would speak on reducing domestic violence and promoting social justice. Let me warmly invite Professor Abraham for delivering Professor J.J. Kattakayam Third Memorial Lecture. Professor Abraham, over.
Thank you. Greetings to all of you. Thank you for inviting me to speak at the third annual memorial lecture hosted by the Institute of Social Research and Action in honor of the late Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. I have to say, what an honor when you have a body of students who carry on his legacy. There's nothing more important than having such a legacy, and an honor to Dr. Kattakayam. Thank you, Dr. Nisha Jolly, and all the students for organizing, and Professor Indira too. As some of you know, first of all, thank you to all the people who are here, including the delegates and many of you who I know. As some of you know, Professor Kattakayam and I knew each other for well over a decade, including in his capacity as president and secretary of the Indian Sociological Society. And during his tenure on the ISRA, I'm just being sure that we also keep keep the time. So I just was setting that up. And during his tenure on the ISRA 11 Executive Committee, we both met in India and in the United States in New York, as well as at various conferences at ISA and ISS. And he invited me to give talks in India, including Kerala. I was impressed at the number of people who would approach him, including several students, always thanking him for his work, for guiding him, and for being a source of intellectual work, as well as for his inspiration. Indira talked often about the support, intellectual, and practical guidance he provided. I want to also take this opportunity to acknowledge John's family, his spouse and children and grandchildren, who he spoke so highly about. I'm glad that the Institute holds this annual memorial lecture in his honor. Professor Kattakayam was a wonderful colleague and friend. We often talked about domestic violence and his interest in addressing elder abuse. The importance for us sociologists to link our research and action in building a more caring society and a more just world. So my talk today is just some reflections of the problems and possibilities for sociology to engage in research and action in reducing domestic violence and promoting social justice. I say this because among the audience and among Professor Kattakayam's students, there are many who have great expertise. So mine are primarily broad reflections. Since its earliest history, sociology has responded to a wide range of social and societal challenges. Addressing domestic violence and social justice concerns is not a new terrain for the social sciences. We have made some progress in addressing domestic violence, yet this progress is uneven. And we see the persistence of gender-based violence, gender inequality, intersecting with other forms of inequality. More recently, with the global pandemic and its aftermath, there is a renewed interest and increasing urgency in studying, theorizing, researching, as well as linking knowledge and practice in examining and addressing violence, including domestic violence. The persistence, prevalence, and the pervasiveness of domestic violence, gender-based and intersectional violence, require continued attention at the micro, meso, and macro levels. Although it is a worldwide problem cutting across cultures, boundaries, time, and political systems, addressing and connecting the social, economic, political context does matter. The damage caused by domestic and family violence not only affects everyone involved, but impacts future generations too. Vast numbers of people, particularly women, continue to be deprived of control over their own bodies and lives, excluded from decision-making, and denied safety from violence. Some are more vulnerable than others based on their social, economic, and political location. We also consider the different history, structural conditions, and cultural factors in specific settings that make certain groups, for example, undocumented migrants, elderly, domestic workers, refugees, LGBTQ persons, more vulnerable than others. Human rights and social justice still seem to be out of reach for many. The consequence of poverty and the lack of opportunity can also be particularly severe for LGBTQ, ethnic, and religious minorities. Although some progress has been made, as I said, this progress is uneven, siloed, and limited, and does not reduce structural inequalities essential to mitigating domestic violence and promoting justice. Globally, millions of people have experienced domestic violence. An estimated 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to physical or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their lifetime. And this is for 30% of women aged 15 and older. We're confronted with the global prevalence of domestic violence. While there have been strides made in women's legal rights, as Indra also mentioned, vast numbers of women and minorities continue to be denied control over their own bodies, excluded from decision-making, and denied protection from violence. Millions of women, LGBTQ, still live in places where their rights are not recognized and where domestic violence is not considered a crime, and even where there has been some progress made in the legal frameworks, millions report experiencing violence in their lifetime, and usually at the hands of an intimate partner, which we've written about. The systematic targeting of the vulnerable is also not only characteristic of modern day warfare and conflict zones, but often normalized in the everyday lived experience of many within and outside of the home. Safety from harm is not a reality for many, and particularly also for minoritized groups. The onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic and the responses to this pandemic have amplified entrenched inequalities and vulnerabilities and exposed fatal flaws in our social, political, and economic structures. In addition to the immense tragic loss of millions of lives, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted the lives, livelihood, and well-being of large numbers of people, especially the most disadvantaged. It has increased wealth disparities, created immense uncertainties for many, exacerbated fears and hardships, including food insecurity, unemployment and underemployment, violence, disruptions, challenges in education, digital divides, crises in care, increased mental health vulnerabilities, problems of migration, displacement, and statelessness. What is promising, however, is the forms of resilience and resistance by individuals, communities, and movements across the globe, both locally and globally, connecting and collaborating to challenge systemic injustices, striving for social justice and social change. Domestic violence is a social justice issue that requires continued attention from social scientists and stakeholders to engage in research and action. For me, as I've spoken earlier, understanding social justice can be seen through injustices. The concept of social justice has garnered the attention of the world, from academics and activists to government organizations and international communities. It has captured the emotions of people and nations. It has empowered individuals and groups and formed movements for social change. While an exact definition is elusive, the notion of social justice is integral to the discourse and practices of equality, liberty, rights, fairness, freedoms, and justice. It is a key component in identifying addressing the changes that are needed across the globe, looking at social structures and processes, at the relations and the dynamics that shape societies. Social justice as a concept draws our attention to embedded issues of wealth, resource distribution, oppression, representation, recognition, access, and safety. Now, social justice has been at times dismissed as an amorphous ethical concept lacking the precision needed to integrate into a coherent strategy for meaningful action. Although premised on the principle that all human beings are of consequence and worthy of consideration, the definition of what exactly is just or unjust remains contentious and unresolved. Nevertheless, the term social justice is increasingly used, often as a catch-all node around which the need for systemic change towards greater society and social decency aggregate. Defining exactly what constitutes justice social justice is subject to debate and diverse. It is ever-changing, contested, and contextual. Justice is also a process, the principles of which no single theory can delineate. In the same way, social justice means different things to different people. There are those who believe that the ends of social justice are met only if equality is absolute in every circumstance, and others who believe that social justice is debased if it does not factor in the needs of the disadvantaged. There are many meanings, approaches, and opinions about social justice, and obviously a comprehensive coverage is beyond the scope of today's talk. Sociologists around the world have a long history of generating research that can affect change. Building on a spectrum of thinkers, today sociologists expand both the conceptual and empirical work that continues to enrich our understanding of social justice. Feminist sociologists, post-colonial and critical race scholars, scholars from the global south, and activists in highlighting a spectrum of inequalities and injustices have already provided important theoretical works, frameworks, methodologies, and practices to actively address the need for social change. Likewise, sociologists have documented social movements in different parts of the globe, including India, and have challenged dominant structures and various types of systemic discrimination from which we can all learn. The four lines of social justice move and shift beneath our feet, while always addressing questions of structure and agency, building theory upon social conditions, relations, and processes. Many emphasize the politics of recognition and representation and address the importance of intersectionality, citizenship, and community. The needs of inclusion and belonging also play a great role in conceptualizations of social justice, as well as access to resources. As I've noted earlier in my work, social justice draws our attention to embedded issues of wealth, resource distribution, oppression, representation, recognition, and access. It is a key component in identifying and addressing changes needed across the globe. Today, in a violent, unequal, and divided world, striving for social justice seems a challenging endeavor, and even more so when we think of various authoritarian governments across the world. The reality is that inequalities and injustices persist, taking new forms and are growing. So there are some context connections and intersections. More than 3 decades ago, when I was doing research on marital violence among South Asian immigrants in the United States, I learned the importance of action research, of the need for clarity of conceptualization and understanding the complex context and connections, contradictions, and contestations in addressing violence, including over words such as victim, survivors, vulnerability, and resilience. I learned much of this from those who had experienced domestic violence, from community-based organizations, from feminist and critical race scholar activists addressing gender and intersectional violence. Over the years, it has made me think about the importance and context of words, concepts, and actions that contour the discourse on gender-based violence, to consider and connect vulnerabilities and resistance at the micro, meso, and macro levels, to consider how these terms are used by different sectors, including governments, nonprofits, funders, corporations, religious institutions, and multilateral agencies, and its implications for addressing gender and intersectional violence, more specifically in addressing domestic violence. How is it appropriate and exploited by the state to justify certain governmental actions and as a tool to exercise power and control? These translate into mobilizations and legislation, in funding, and in the role of the state. How scholar activists use these concepts that can be helpful and challenging as we move forwards, or as we move forward towards reducing domestic violence and promoting social justice for social transformation. Now, these are clearly not new questions, but one that many of us grapple with. So given Professor Kattakayam's interest and our conversations, and as this is hosted by the Institute of Social Research and Action, I want to focus here on some of the pitfalls and possibilities of engaging in research and action, something that I have been concerned over for many years. So framing, I'm going to talk about some of the issues. Framing the issues, we need to critically re-examine and reassess existing theories and methods of research in addressing domestic violence, as well as consider what perspectives help promote gender justice, but also connect it to the broader struggles for social justice. We can strengthen our theories and methods by partnering with communities to not only document social justices, human rights violations, political and economic inequality, corruption, government and corporate collusion, but also addressing forms of exclusions. By offering paths to global fairness and developing effective strategies for social change. To really address domestic violence, we must challenge patriarchal structures and relations within societies. But we also need to challenge those structures of power and those institutions that create and maintain other forms of inequality and oppression, which, in interaction with patriarchal structures and practices, maintain and exacerbate domestic and gender-based and intersectional violence. Both in India and in other parts of the world and the United States, sociologists have engaged in action research, or research and action, and played a pivotal role in challenging patriarchy and working towards ending domestic violence. In the United States, feminist scholars and sociologists of color have played a critical role in using the theoretical framework of intersectionality in addressing the problem of violence. That is, to increasingly use the intersections of ethnicity, class, race, gender, sexuality, citizenship, legal status, age, and region in power relations as vital to conceptualizing a framework for the analysis of domestic violence and in examining issues of oppression and exclusion. The lack of a comprehensive understanding of the matrix of power, the complexity and intersectionality in the ways domestic violence occurs, can also lead to narrowly defined policy formulation and the implementation to truly protect the different categories of the vulnerable who are abused. Drawing upon an intersection analysis enables us to examine the manifestations and outcomes of domestic violence at the interpersonal, community, and macro-institutional levels. It can show how domestic violence is closely interlocked with structural and cultural oppression. Looking at oppression solely in terms of male domination, female subordination is to deny the importance of other forms of inequality that intersect and contribute to domestic violence, the manifestations of such violence, and the forms of interventions and policy formulations required for social change. A second part that I want to talk about in terms of the risks and the possibilities is the possibilities and pitfalls of funding. Now, let me move to the second aspect, as it is something that is particularly concerning in the past, but has become even more so now. Funding is a vital part that enables us to engage in research and action that can help make a difference. And I talk about funding because as we talk about the backlash against the social sciences, the issue of funding for research in addressing domestic violence and social justice is a complex one. For researchers engaged in analyzing these issues, funding sources from the state, from state funding, grants from corporations, international agencies, universities, foundations, and collaborative grants with NGOs are all pretty complicated. A part of the transformation politic entails devoting attention to reconciling the demands of funding sources and our own research agendas. The question researchers and activists must ask is, how do we acquire funding without compromising our research collaboration with stakeholders? We must be careful how we engage in this funding process, especially at a time when our work can be compromised by both the state and corporate international entities. A concrete example that I draw from here is the funding of anti-domestic violence work in the United States. In the US, we have had, as you know, an over-reliance on criminalization, which has been critiqued by feminist scholars, especially critical race theorists and minority scholars, activists, who have noted there are clearly political pragmatic challenges in doing anti-violence work. There are both benefits and challenges from state protectionism and state partnerships within the anti-violence movement. However, there are a number of problems too. In the US, the dependence on federal funding and a tunnel vision approach to funding primarily channeled for a long time into the criminal justice system in addressing domestic violence does appear to render the formation of more creative, diverse, yet comprehensive solutions outside of the legal framework harder to envision or achieve. It has also been depoliticized. It has depoliticized the radical roots of the anti-violence movement and led to a specific form of professionalization of the field that in many ways fitted well with the neoliberal framework. In the United States, we've made great strides in obtaining vital funding to address violence against women through the Violence Against Women's Act of 1994, which has been then has continued. Although researchers and community activists have collaborated on important projects and received private and state funding to end violence against women and gender-based violence and intersectional violence, it has, and this is one of the major problems, contributed to a form of slotting and compartmentalization of the forms of violence that is problematic as they lend themselves to competition and at times divisive politics among not just researchers, community-based organizations, but scholars seeking resources to engage in research. It drives a wedge among community-based organizations and scholars in building partnerships in ways to end all forms of violence. More problematic is that funding drives the areas of research and issues rather than the issues that require the attention of scholars and activists. For example, in addressing the violence against women funding at times leads to highlighting the problems of trafficking, stalking, domestic violence, child abuse, as though they are separate issues. But it also lends, and we want to give importance to all, but it also lends to a form of comparative suffering, to what I had read a long time ago in a blog called Oppression Olympics. For me, this type of funding leads to commodification and co-optation of research and community-based partnerships in addressing violence. In India, we have seen, and you are the experts on this, an approach which has drawn upon both legal and social movements, and major contributions also by researchers. It has also seen, however, the growth of NGOs, which can be challenging, but I hope to hear more and get insights from you all in the discussion session on both framing and action. At the same time, we need to weave vision with pragmatism as part of our long-term goal. We need to be practical and strategically tap those resources that use institutional criteria as a form of gatekeeping, particularly to exclude funding of what are perceived as not rigorous or not scientific research, while being careful not to be co-opted. Utilizing mainstream funding in the short run is one means of appropriating that which is frequently denied to us for achieving more long-term gains for the issues we address. Similarly, connecting with funding entities can also become an entree for some sociologists into the decision-making process, whereby they can influence the direction of future fund allocation in important ways. Ultimately, reclaiming what is kept away from us as social scientists through strategic maneuvering, but without losing sight of our main sociological agenda, may have to be part of the long-term strategy for sociologists to challenge existing paradigms of the state and corporate funding, international agencies, and creating new ones, especially in the study of domestic violence and all forms of violence and social justice. A third important way for us to reduce domestic violence and promote social justice is through policies and practices. By linking research and action in reducing domestic violence and promoting social justice, we sociologists can help shift private problems into public issues, influence public policy for social justice, and help to ensure the rights and well-being of all people. Addressing the problem of domestic and family violence has included invoking the power of the state in seeking solution. Yet we're also seeing how the state support can have serious shortfalls, in some cases leading to policies and laws that remove rights, increase obstacles, and in some cases even penalize and oppress victims of domestic violence rather than supporting them as they should. Scholars and activists have sought to critique the state in showing the structural conditions and processes that contribute to and continue to maintain violence and inequality. In the context of domestic violence, this has entailed not only shifting it from a private problem to a public issue, but also trying to address intersectionality as a tool for framing and analysis. Researchers and activists need to work together to not only raise media attention to the problem, but to counter misinformation, provide data from research, highlight the causal factors and manifestations, as well as addressing the biases and limitations in the provision of resources to survivors of domestic violence. Our research and activism can demonstrate how the state, immigration laws, the police, courts, health systems, employment is closely connected to domestic violence and social justice. How domestic violence is a social justice concern linked to economic, social, and political problems. By engaging in comparative analysis of policies and practices, sociologists, social scientists, and those of us engaged in anti-violence work, as many of you are, can point to promising practices in increasing pathways to equality and justice, including in the intervention and elimination of domestic violence. A fourth way that I think is institutional reform. And this is to seek institutional reform, especially within law enforcement and the judicial system, while also looking beyond the judicial system. Time and again, we see the barriers encountered in addressing violence. In some countries, in several countries, some police have been partners in crime. Those are supposed to ensure our safety are engaged in violence through their active participation, indirect participation, or strategic silence as violence is perpetrated. It is for us as researchers and activists to examine the cases for such actions and explain why it is frequently systemic within these institutions that are supposed to be the custodians of justice. We can help change this by collecting and analyzing data while also querying the sources of data collection. Through our reports and recommendations, through education and training and developing measures of accountability, the opportunities to see groups of lawyers, judges, and police about research and to share with them the complexity of the cultural and structural factors, causes and conditions that shapes of victim survivors' experience of violence and the multiple barriers that they encounter in navigating the judicial system and other systems is critical. For victim survivors of violence, it often seems that there is no point in seeking legal resource if the judicial system is not responsive or if other institutions are unresponsive, and that is just going to be another barrier in obtaining justice. Scholars and activists have found that we need greater awareness among police and judges of the important role that the law enforcement and the judicial system can play in responding to domestic violence, but also always keeping them accountable. Sociologists can testify in courts, provide written documentation, oral input, reports, like many of you talk about in the Center for Research and Action. And many years ago, one of the important cases in which I testified as a domestic expert in court was a successful gender-based asylum case. And I see this as also an important part of our research, and in many parts, India, Brazil, Latin America, and Argentina. Teaching, a fifth way is to ensure the importance of our research is matched by the importance of our teaching. And I think John Kattakayam often talked about that. We must ensure that students and the public see how our disciplines, for example, sociology, offers important ways to examine, understand, and influence the world we live in, but also for our future. This entails ensuring that students can engage in critical thinking, learn and apply their sound grasp of theories and rigorous methods and action. Our students are the future and one of the most important publics in helping to pave the way to a better world. And this makes me particularly happy when I see the students doing such a project with the action, with your center. Sociology, together with other disciplines, can help contour a better place and understanding. But this means that we must share our research with the main stakeholders. At this critical time, sociologists must share our research, reflect and respond to issues, provide clear frameworks for analysis, counter distortions and misrepresentations, and substantiate our perspectives on key concepts in terms that are accessible and straightforward. We must use our analysis to intervene and address injustice. Of course, I'm also aware that this can be personally perilous, with swift retribution for some. We thus also have the responsibility to mobilize through research and action and ensure the support and safety of researchers engaged in work that put them at risk for the greater good of society. So what can we sociologists do? I believe it's becoming increasingly clear that sociological engagement and intervention is necessary. If we sociologists effectively spread and share our knowledge with the broader society of which we are a part, then together we can help frame our world and the futures we want. We have, as I have said before, an intellectual, moral, and social responsibility as sociologists to generate and share knowledge and to engage in collective action to build a better world. To do this, we will need to develop what I have called for several years, a contextual global sociology. And I got this from the context of the ISA and other disciplines where it's not just about being global or contextual, it is bringing the both together. And we develop a contextual global sociology and collaborate with other disciplines in countering dangerous discourses that foment violence, xenophobia, Islamophobia, racism, and a spectrum of inequalities and social exclusions across the world. Our role is not just to problematize, but also to share solutions. We need to critically examine the use of the concepts and how and to what end is it being applied by different sectors. We need to provide a spectrum of innovative tools and methodologies that can help us measure domestic violence. We need to conceptualize and help develop concrete outcomes in achieving social justice and social change. We need to achieve a better understanding of the relationships and interacting systems such as the environment, social, economic, political, and present this in accessible ways that maximize public understanding. We need to disseminate the results of our research such that this reaches multiple publics and can be discussed. We need to identify the potential risks and the possibilities of the use of media, especially social media, as a tool for information sharing. And we see all the time how much misinformation also is put on the media, shared on the media. We need to avoid funding that compromises our research. Let research priorities guide funding, and not funding predetermine the research we engage in. We need to challenge and point out, if possible, when our research is being misused. Over the years, I have strongly felt that an important way that we sociologists across the globe can contribute is by drawing upon contextual global sociology, by using a spectrum of theories, collaborative methodologies, and actions to conceptualize, contextualize, and connect to reduce, for example, domestic violence and promote social justice. We can offer possible pathways for social change and show that sociological analysis, engagement, and intervention by linking research and action is necessary. And this is a time for us to reimagine and work together to build an equal, just, peaceful, and sustainable world for all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello, Indra ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Margaret, for enlightening us and taking us through what I consider very important, primarily for two reasons. One, and to me, as I said in my very brief presidential address, it's very important for sociology to engage itself in public discourses on violence and many other issues that we are living with in our times. And actually, I think that our subjects, not just sociology, but social sciences in general, disengagement with some of the lived experiences of people is primarily responsible for our discipline, receiving quite a lot of criticism in different spheres. So, I mean, talking about violence itself, just 2 days ago, I was talking at the Center for Women's Studies, and I was saying that, you see, when centers were started, when women's studies, or today, called gender studies in most of the institutions, there was a complete connect between the movement and the academia. And many people who came into the academia came from the movement. But today, it really disturbs me that there is a total disconnect between the two. And concepts such as university women and activist women are being used. And there are occasions when people in charge of administration of universities have been openly saying, we don't want troublemakers. Now, I think this is very dangerous, because the realities of violence and many other challenges that women live with, and as you have said, the intersectionalities between caste, between gender, between class, between location, and many other issues are completely, sidetracked. So I think that it is very important that Professor Margaret drew our attention to this and also told us how we should go about it. Because another disturbing element for me is the disconnect between what we call as theory and activism. I'm always bothered about this. How should knowledge be generated and how should knowledge be transferred? So I believe that narratives are very important, and talking to people who have lived with violence, talking to people who have been experiencing this day in and day out, and bringing it to the public domain, as Professor Margaret has also told us, is very important. So, and I must just quickly share with you that in the last week or so, Mysore district and the neighboring districts have been flooded with arrests of people who are involved in cases of sex selective abortions. And many people are talking as if this has just cropped up all of a sudden. But I for sure know that this has been going on for the last nearly 3 decades. And what were they doing about it? I honestly fail to understand. In fact, the movement has brought this issue to the public domain. We have talked about it, written about it. So I think that unless domestic violence, the disconnect, as I said, between the private sphere and the public sphere goes, and we look at it as a problem with which, we at this point of time may not be experiencing, but then as long as we don't treat domestic violence as an issue that maybe in your neighborhood may be being suffered by somebody whom you know or you don't know. But as human beings, as citizens, it is our duty to respond. And as people in academia, we have a responsibility to talk about it. So I'm reminded of Professor Abraham also referred to that, John's work in the area of elderly abuse. And today I understand that it has emerged as such a serious issue in sociology. So I thank you very much for giving us this enlightening lecture and taking us through your own work in the area and telling us how we should go about it in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Indra.
Thank you, Professor Indra and Professor Abraham, for giving us an enriching evening and well-deserving gesture for everything Professor Kattakayam has been. The second half of this evening is meant to be a sharing of memoir or recollection of memories of Professor Kattakayam by his colleagues, friends, family, and students. Let me invite Professor Maitri Chaudhary, former professor in JNU, to share her thoughts about Professor Kattakayam and how she envisaged we take his efforts forward. Professor Maitri Chaudhary. Maitri ma'am, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. Is that okay, Charles, now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
So Professor Indira Rao, Professor Margaret Abraham, scholars across disciplines, colleagues, students, family members of Professor Kattakayam. I'm a bit of an upstart here. I do not have the kind of long, decade-long associations that Professor Indira mentioned about Professor Kattakayam. But what I was thinking of as I was hearing is that perhaps if this session is about his life and legacy, what I'm most struck is by the legacy. A point I think that both Professor Indira and Professor Abraham mentioned, that to have a body of scholars to continue this tradition and institutionalize and go back to the kind of work that he had is a remarkable achievement. I think we have a lot to learn from this. So I would like at the very start to convey my sincere thanks to the Jacob John Kattakayam Students Collective, because as has been mentioned by both Professor Indira and Professor Margaret, is the students are the immediate public to which teachers talk to. That if we have to begin about the relationship that we have as academics within quotes to the larger public, it is mediated through the students who then go out and engage with a host of activities and institutions across society. My thanks here again to Professor Anthony Palakal and to the energetic and vibrant fraternity of the sociologists of Kerala, of which I think Professor Kattakayam had no mean role to play. Many of you here have had the privilege of having known him for decades. I did not have that kind of face-to-face interaction with him. I did meet him a couple of times, and very late in life, in fact, just a few years before he passed away. And what struck me was the energy, warmth, cheerfulness, and intense enthusiasm in all the activities that he was involved in. We spent a day in Chandigarh, if I was not wrong, in 2018, a day-long activity, and he shared with me his past interest and the fact that in the immediate future, he was about to attend the UN Working Group in Aging sessions in New York. It was not that he just said it in passing. Once he reached there, I, who did not know him so well, he shared the kind of deliberations that was going on there. He shared just not pictures, but the debates that were taking place. I thought that was the beginning of perhaps a more sustained relationship to him. But unfortunately, very shortly after that, he passed away, leaving behind a legacy. And it is this legacy I want to very, very shortly comment upon, because I do not have that kind of personal access that many of you had the privilege to do. What struck me most is the institutional building and professional ethos. That he was not somebody who was doing things for himself, but his activities were directly or indirectly building up not just scholarship, but institutions which could promote that scholarship. His engagement with the academia and the larger world, which Professor Indira and Professor Margaret mentioned, is something that we need to take more seriously today, because as has been mentioned, the social sciences are in a strange sense in a state of crisis in some parts, and also in a state of reinvention of what exactly do we mean as sociologists. So very often the point that Margaret Abraham mentioned at the last, that do we provide knowledge that feeds into policy, into public deliberations, or do we reaffirm what policymakers expect us to do? And I think it's that tricky terrain that we'll have to navigate. And we have to navigate not alone, but collectively. And I was very struck with the fact that it is called the Students' Collective, because perhaps that is the greatest tribute that you could pay today to Professor Kattakayam's life and legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chowdhury. Now I invite Professor Anthony Palakal, Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Kerala, and a student of Professor Kattakayam, to share his thought with us. Professor Anthony.
Yes, thank you, Charles. Very warm greetings to you, the speakers of the day, Professor Indira, Professor Abraham, Professor Maitreyi, and all those who are present here, especially Professor Kattakayam's family members, Gracie Auntie, GB, and Jisha. Reminiscing about Professor Kattakayam on behalf of his own students' collective is, as it has always been, a poignant and deeply sorrowful experience. While Professor Kattakayam held various roles as an educationist, academician, research guide, institution builder, administrator, leader, and organizer, for those of us who have gathered here today from far and near, he was above all a cherished friend indeed. However, for us, his research scholars, all 45 of us, forming the Students' Collective, the majority of whom are presently teachers and researchers across the country and some in abroad, he has been a guru in every sense of the word. He sailed with us through the high and low currents, successes and failures, both big and small. He treated our joys and sorrows as his own with complete trust and care. I began my close acquaintance with Professor Kattakayam in the early 2000s when I joined for my PhD under his guidance and supervision. We soon developed a long-standing personal bond that stood me in good stead in my academic, professional, and personal lives. Even at the most critical juncture of my life, when several, close and distant, raised their eyebrows and walked away, he stood by my side with no stint of doubt or prejudice. I'm sure the majority of us in the Students' Collective Forum have similar experiences to share. Professor Kattakayam stood by us in our struggles and crises, offering unwavering support and courage. He had the special charisma to identify the strengths of each of us and build on those strengths, making each one of us feel special, cared for, and supported. That is the reason why when Dr. Nisha Jolie Nelson, the convener of this year's memorial lecture, posted a cute photograph of Professor Kattakayam in our WhatsApp group the other day with the caption, "We really miss him." It truly expressed the sentiments of each one of us. Yes, it is hard to part with the inevitable reality that Professor Kattakayam has departed because of his unfathomable influence on our lives, shaping us not only as academics, but as good human beings. Of course, for those of us who were genuinely open to learn from his school of life without malice, he was basically a man of action than a preacher. As his scholars who were fortunate to be included in his extended family, if we are unable to overcome the grief of his departure, I wonder how intense the agony and grief must be for his dear ones. Daisy Andy, his wife, Jibi, and Jisha, his lovely son and daughter. Regarding his professional life, to remain active and productive in academics for about half a century is a rare phenomenon. And Professor Kattakayam has been a testimony to this extraordinary academic feat. In fact, he appeared even more enthusiastic and resilient after his formal retirement from the Academic Staff College of the University of Kerala as its impeccable professor cum director at the age of 62 with an extension of 2 years. When he assumed the charge of the Academic Staff College in 1998, its national status was at the bottom, and under his leadership, it rose to become the #1 institution in the country in 2005, maintaining that position until he left the office. As a sociologist and educationist, holding various positions and responsibilities in the university as well as in the profession at multiple levels, Professor Kattakayam has been at the forefront of the discipline on regional, national, and international fronts, contributing immensely to the growth of the university and the development of the discipline. As a professional sociologist, Professor Kattakayam provided selfless service, as has been mentioned by both Professor Indira and Professor Abraham, to the Indian Sociological Society in various capacities, including its secretary and president. His professionalism was evident in dedicating his valuable time, energy, and resources to the academic fraternity, a rare commitment, as noted by Professor T.K. Uman, who stated, to find competent professionals in India who are willing to convert part of their scholastic time into associational time in every capacity, whether at the regional, national, or international levels. He was known for his impeccable integrity, unblemished character, and his ever readiness to serve his students, scholars, colleagues, and friends. Professor Kattakayam was not only highly professional in his academic and administrative endeavors, but also profoundly humane, seamlessly blending empathetic understanding with a strong application of heartfelt sentiments in all his professional undertaking. He was personally professional, so to say, for everyone, everywhere. From the perspective of modern management principles, Professor Kattakayam first and foremost excelled as a developer on 3 fronts: developer of vision, developer of a team, and more inspiringly, developer of humane individuals who came in contact with him. He prioritized scholastic and academic interests above considerations of religion, politics, caste, or region in his engagement with our professional community. In his last days, despite deep anguish, he shared his concerns with me about certain unhealthy tendencies, privileging power, caste, religion, politics, region, and so on, that he feared were creeping into the leadership aspirants in ISS. Only upon his unexpected demise did I realize that he was indeed passing on the task of countering such unhealthy practices in our professional fraternity. Therefore, I find courage in making certain staggering attempts in my modest ways to uphold the mantle of academic professionalism and vibrancy with our professional fraternity. Allow me to conclude this memoir by sharing one of the most shocking and painful memories that I'm still struggling to digest. It's related to the 45th All India Sociological Conference organized in December 2019 at the Department of Sociology, University of Kerala, marking the culmination of the year-long Golden Jubilee celebrations of the department, the first university department for sociology in the state of Kerala. It is recorded as one of the most successfully conducted national events in the history of the university and the Indian Sociological Society, amidst umpteen challenges and difficulties. However, as the organizing secretary of this mega event, it has left an indelible mark of sadness and pain in me due to the untimely loss of Professor Kattakayam. He bid us his final adieu at a time when he was providing us with much needed guidance and counsel as the chairman of the organizing committee. His sudden demise, about a fortnight before the conference was to commence, was something that I could not come to terms with. It was precisely to consolidate and share the profound gratitude and appreciation of the cohort of students and legion of friends and associates to Professor Kattakayam. I, with his knowledge and consent, took the lead along with Dr. Nisha Jolie Nelson to bring out a Festschrift volume. Most unfortunately, the printer at Rawat Publications that began printing this Festschrift had to be stopped abruptly at my panicked call to inscribe this last sentence in our preface of the book. I quote, "As this Festschrift goes to print, we are struggling to accept the hard fact that Professor Jacob John Kattakayam is no longer with us, as he returned to the divine womb of Mother Nature to be a beacon of light. We then had to release the Festschrift in his eternal absence in the main conference venue named after him. Yes, Professor Kattakayam continues to live in us as a beacon of light, inspiring us to carry forward the profound legacy that he has left behind. I'm sure this legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anthony, for sharing the fond memories of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam with us. This has indeed been a great evening. I'm sure this collectivity would have more aspirations to achieve and would be looking forward to meet next year. I invite Dr. Richa, Assistant Professor, BCM College, Kottayam, for extending our words of thanks to the august audience. Dr. Richa.
Dr. Charles, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Good evening to all. Leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It's about one's life influencing another. This statement is true for Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, who has inspired and changed the life of his students and many others, and on whose memory we have come together today. Incidentally, today in the esteemed gathering, we have leaders who have both reputed position as well as track records of being stellar examples in influencing the thoughts and path of our communities. And it is with deep sense of gratification that I undertake this duty to thank each of them for their presence here today. Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, third memorial lecture was chaired by Professor R. Indira, Professor of Eminence, MS Ramia University, an eminent sociologist, a close associate and friend of Professor Kattakayam, your presence has added immense value to this occasion. I, on behalf of J.J.K Student Collective, extend our heartfelt gratitude for sharing your time, grace, and wisdom in this gathering. Thank you, ma'am. Professor Margaret Abraham has delivered the memorial lecture today on a topic very pertinent to veteran and budding sociological thinkers, as well as in the present-day society. Her insightful talk delved into the ongoing global challenges of domestic violence, highlighting the undeniable need for sustained attention from social scientists and stakeholders alike. Thank you, madam, for your very rigorous and sharp commentary on the same. We deeply respect the interest and readiness you have shown in joining us despite the time differences and logistic challenges. Thank you, ma'am. A special thanks to Professor Maitri Chaudhary and Professor Anani Palakal for their words were shade of memory today. We extend special thanks to Professor Maitri Chaudhary for gracing us with her presence and for memory she has presented. I would also like to express our gratitude to the family members of Kattakayam sir, Gracie Auntie, Jibi and Jisha, and all other family members. We are grateful for your presence and for the opportunity to share these moments with you. I now thank Dr. Sheetal S. Kumar, who opened the session with very warm note of introduction, and Dr. Nisha Noli Nelson, who graciously welcomed the attendees to this gathering. Thank you for your words and presence. I thank the community of academicians and well-wishers from regional, national, and international spheres, the community of students, formal and informal, who came together to remember Professor Kattakayam. Your presence has undoubtedly enriched today's lecture. Heartfelt thanks to all the committee members of J.J.K Student Collective who have worked tirelessly behind the scene to make the event resounding success. Your dedication to honor our Kattakayam's legacy is truly commendable. I thank each one of you wholeheartedly. With the profound insight shared today, the memories of Kattakayam that we carry in our heart, let us continue to remember, reflect, relate, and grow together, and thought that the legacy passed on by teachers like Professor Kattakayam continue to evolve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rija. We are sure that there are many more memories that would pour down in this hour, but our time delimits us. Anyone who has known Professor Kattakayam would not only remember him, but also has a whole lot of memories to carry and share. This is what we call a life less ordinary. Professor Kattakayam lives through our fond memories of him and the deeds he did when he was mortally alive. On that note, we thank everyone who became part of this event and made themselves available for us. Let's bid good night, only to meet again. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Dr.
ma'am.
Chaudhary.
Thank you very much, Palakal.
Palakal.
Thank you.
Professor Palakal, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Professor Dilip. Yes.
Thank you, Professor
Thank you for your
Palakal, and thank you, Professor Chaudhary, and
Thank
thank you, Professor Indra, and Dr. Nisha Jolly, as well as Dr. Rija. It was a pleasure being here today. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in December.
Thank you.
Same
Thank
here
you.
from all of us. Thank you, Margaret, for being with us. And I want to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this event, which celebrates the memory of a very good friend. And as I said, a mentor. And I think this is the best, remembrance that a teacher can have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Indira.
Thank you, ma'am.
for your presence.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
for
thank you to the Students Collective.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.